So here we all are. I can see, I love this part, Guy, when you have a live Zoom and you can actually see people, right?
Very cool.
So yeah, here we are with Guy Macpherson. This is actually really, it's an honor, really. And people say that, but I really mean that because, you've had a podcast, the Trauma Therapist podcast, for how long?
Several years.
Come on. I
Se
was on it. I think you'd already been going strong enough.
like 8, 9 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
a
think
long
I've
time.
been on twice with you.
Oh
Once was
yeah.
maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I was just kind of getting into this online world of teaching and whatever. I think I might have even been before I wrote my first book.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. And then I was on a couple of years ago, I guess, and that was wonderful to be back again. And you've also got a new thing happening now where you're inviting people to come and guest
L-
host, which is,
Love it.
I love that idea.
Yeah, it's
So
really
any of
cool.
our group here, if you're up for guest hosting, and Leslie Ellis was on and she guest hosted with somebody. So Leslie's a dear friend of mine.
Yeah,
Um,
I've had some amazing people do it.
yeah, yeah. So when you asked me or you put out that kind of invitation, I said, well, why don't you come and be my guest? And so here we are. So let's start. We usually start because this is an embodied dialogue series with just taking a moment to come into the body. And full disclosure today, guys, I have a cold and I have that, that sensation in your head when you have like cotton batton kind of growing around your head and inside your head. So I was reminded of how it's difficult to really come into presence, which we're going to talk about because Guy and I love talking about presence. It's difficult to come into presence when you don't feel well, right? When you're physically, it's hard when you don't feel well emotionally. It's also really hard when you don't feel well physically. It it's like it's a background feeling that Jenlyn talked about, but it becomes a forefront. And it's difficult to find that real fresh quality of freshness when you don't feel well physically. There's maybe chronic pain or fatigue or this cold sensation or whatever it is. And so, Jean would talk about what do we do when it's hard to come into presence more the typical way that we would. And we talked about things like clearing space backwards. And I don't think we've ever done this on embodied dialogues. But clearing space is step one in focusing. And it's like meditation, a mindfulness practice of clearing things out that get in the way of feeling uncomfortable. Clearing space backwards is like asking the question, is there a place in my body, physically in my body, or is there a moment in my life that feels okay? So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It's no big moment. It's just a moment you remember that feels all right. And so that's what we bring our attention to and try to kind of allow it to emerge a little bit more as we bring presence to it without any kind of pressure. So that's what we're going to work with today, clearing space backwards. And I honestly don't remember who created this. I don't think it was Jean Gendlin. It might have been my focusing teacher, Mary Armstrong. We can ask Nancy Fall. She's in the audience later. Okay, so let's just take a moment. We're just going to pause. And just notice if you'd like to soften your gaze. You don't have to. If you're feeling a little dysregulated, you might not want to close your eyes. You might just want to find something in the room to bring attention to. And then if it does feel okay, then close your eyes and just slowly drop your awareness inside. And then we can just drop this question down into the body. Is there any place in my body, any part, the tip of my nose, my earlobes, maybe your toes or your fingers, any place in the body physically that feels okay? Or you could ask yourself the question, is there any moment in my life that feels all right to spend a moment in time with? And then just let your body decide. And when you have that spot, that place, see if it's okay to really let your attention come into that place. And just invite it to grow a little bit bigger, just to emerge a little bit more. So you can say hello to this place that feels okay. And if it wants to, it could get even a little bit bigger. Just allowing it to awaken. Saying, oh, hello, hello place that feels okay. And maybe there's a handle in there for this place, a word or an image. Maybe there's sounds and smells, movements in your body, something that really captures the essence of this okay place. And then when you've got that, if you do, we can move to step 6 of really welcoming it. Thanking your body for showing you this place that feels okay, even when a lot of stuff doesn't. Knowing that you can come back here, you can use this as a resource to come back to. And so when you're ready, just feeling your feet on the ground. And slowly opening your eyes if they're closed. And coming back to the room. It seems like these days we really need to cultivate those places, right? And so much of your life, Guy, has been really devoted to exploring trauma, right? Yeah, I mean, even, before the podcast, I think you did a PhD studying trauma. And even before that, I think part of the story about how you got into all of this has to do with your brother,
Right.
who was a Navy SEAL.
Right.
Yeah, and he developed post-traumatic stress, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Can you
Yeah.
say more about that? Because I always think that's so interesting, to ask people, how did you get here? Where did all of that begin? Or at least are you aware that it began?
Well, that's just it. I mean, there's the easy answer, this, and then there's the dots that lead all the way back. I mean, I was from a very young age. Well, at a very young age, I was bullied, um, and that really impacted the trajectory of
Yeah.
my life. Um, I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't aware of how it played out in my self-esteem, how I showed up in relationships and so forth, and how I reacted to people who were similarly hurt or traumatized. I had from a very early age, I was uh, could spot those people in the audience, as it were, and see who maybe needed attention or and kind of identified with them
Yeah.
and grew very fond of them. And similarly with my brother, yeah, he came back. He totally jacked up. I mean, the whole nine yards, PTSD and waking up in the middle of the night and yelling at his partners and so forth. And um, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what that was. I,
When
I
was that?
didn't. This was probably 20, 25 years ago, long time ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, and other things happened that set me on a trajectory, on a course to want to do something, to want to help, really.
Mm.
And I started off in the creative arts. I was writing. I went to art school, music, da da da. But it wasn't enough for me. And I got to a point where I was writing fiction, and then I got this call. I don't know how I'm getting kind of detailed here. You can pull me out and stop me whenever you want.
No, I
Okay.
love this. I love
Okay.
it. It's
I
wonderful.
got this
It's
was
your
a
journey.
big moment for me. I was sitting down, this was in Los Angeles, and I had been writing fiction for a while, and I
Mm.
was done for the day, and the phone calls, and it is a friend of mine, this girl who I had lost contact with maybe for about a year, but she called me up and she said that she had been living with AIDS for like 10 years and hadn't told anyone. And she was right then and there calling up people to tell them that she didn't really have much time left. And that phone call for me was like this flaming uh, arrow, telephone pole, really, right through my gut. And there was so much courage in her voice, so much strength in her voice, and I felt to myself, I don't have that. I was
Mm.
so, of course, I felt horrible and awful. When I hung up the phone, I was like, I was just really in awe of her strength to move through this. And I decided that at that point that I needed to find my own courage and my own strength.
Mm.
So I set out on doing these different courses and these like survival courses. And by no means am I, that's not me at all. I'm like, give me a cappuccino in a cafe with a book. I'm in heaven. But I felt like that's what I needed to do to find my own courage. And on one of these courses, and very soon after that, I signed up for this Outward Bound thing. Then I did the survival course. And in
Mm.
that survival course, there were like 15 of us. And in the Utah desert in the summer, again, completely out of my element. But during that time, one of these people, one of the participants got really sick, super sick. And couldn't carry on. And the guides, there were three guides who were friggin' amazing. At the time, you don't really realize how amazing they are. Like, why aren't they helping? Well, because they wanted the other participants to step up. They didn't say this, but
Oh.
myself and this other woman, we carried this guy and we helped him, encouraged him. And that was the moment, was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to help people in these situations, in these. I didn't know, I felt that I could. I didn't know that I could, but I was just drawn to that. So I got back and I was like, I'm going to become a physician.
Mm.
And I went back to my undergrad. And again, I'm not a physician. I'm not. The sciences just kicked my ass. I segued into psychology, which was much more aligned with who I am. And from the get-go, it was trauma for me. It was
Yeah.
being in that situation, learning everything I could about how to do it. I'm going to stop there if you want to ask me a question, but
That's so
yeah.
interesting. Yeah, because and I can see how, speaking of embodied dialogues, it's still so much in your body, right?
Oh,
You
totally.
feel it so deeply. And it's reminding me, like I can see that the need to find that in yourself, that strength, because that's the antithesis of the bully. I mean, you needed to find that to help yourself with the
Right,
victim part, right?
right, right, right.
Yeah. So, and it
I
reminds me of Bess, I remember seeing Bessel years ago saying how, one of the ways that we build this sense of self is through learning how to fight and how to achieve a sense of competence.
right.
And I don't think we talk about that enough, but it's really true. Like sometimes when I'm, working with people and we talk about safety and people just get all activated by that word now, right? But if you say to somebody, well, can you find a moment where you felt your strength? You felt like you knew what you were doing and you did it well. And they love that. Not everybody, but it'll really fit in with and it sounds like you had these moments where you found that part of yourself that you needed that you developed over time. The guy that
Yeah.
led, that carried these people out, and you looked for different ways, right? The traditional physician way, it was like, nope, that's not me.
I mean, I wish I had said nope earlier on in that process, but I I went to graduate school. My first position out of graduate school was working in a clinic in Northern California where we
Mm.
were assessing and treating young kids who were showing early signs of psychosis.
Oh, wow.
And, in graduate school, I was like a lot of us. I mean, I was like, give me, stuff my brain with the knowledge that I thought would make me a good or the best clinician I could be.
Mhm.
That's what I thought was needed. And I continued that thinking in this first position. I was part of a team, was an incredible team. And part of our job was to take these referral calls from parents, teachers, and other therapists to see if their kid was right for the program. And we go through the list of questions, behaviors, medication, drugs, self-harm, and then trauma and learning how to ask if that was occurring, of course. And not surprisingly, 99.9% of these kids had experienced trauma. So you would get, at the end of these calls, you'd get this page filled with this, just it was crazy. All these behaviors and stuff going on and trauma. And the trauma was always unseen by the parents and the teachers and a lot of the therapists as well. And a week later, these kids would walk in and it would be this little kid with a stuffing under their arm or a book under their arm or a tablet. And you'd be like, you'd look at your page and then that kid, all this crap is going on with that kid. And they'd come in And we do these assessments, which were literally 40 pages long. We do it with a partner. And, you'd have to read these things. And I wanted to, I was fresh out of school. I wanted to, get in there and show what I could do. I wanted to help. I wanted to affect the change. And it took me, I think, Jan, it took me about maybe a year when I realized that this cramming of this knowledge and this how though useful, right? You've got to have that. It
Yeah, yeah.
wasn't, it wasn't, there was something else that I was missing.
Right.
And I learned that
Yeah.
when I was working with this young kid. Again, I had a colleague here, and I was like not connecting with this kid. And I had the assessment in my hand, and I was thinking to myself, I was frustrated with myself because I felt like I can connect with people. What am I not doing? And I took the assessment, and I just like I didn't slam it down. I put it down on the table, and I said, all right, let's forget the assessment. Tell me, Tom, whatever. Thomas, tell me, look, forget the assessment. Tell me right now, look, you've come here, you've seen other therapists and other clinicians. This isn't the first time you've seen a clinician. What is it that your parents in the waiting room are not? What do they need to hear? What is your teacher? What do they need to hear from you? What do they not know about you? And those little steps, those series of things just opened the door for that
Hmm.
kid. And it allowed me also
Hmm.
to like put down take off the friggin' degree and the clinician's cap and connect,
I agree,
be a,
Tom.
be a human.
Yeah,
It reminds me of that quote, that
the
amazing Jen quote.
primacy of human presence.
That was it for me. That was it for me. And that really shaped the arc, and informed the arc of what I try to do in my podcast.
And you do. And that's why
So
we hit it off. It was like this magical kind of, it's, I'm really saying this, I've done tons of those podcasts now. The one I did with you really stands out for me because we speak the same language. And I think you asked me to send you that quote of Jen Lentz, the
I
primacy of
have it
human.
up. I have it up. I'm ready.
Wow.
That's so
Yeah, I
inspiring to
want to
me.
start with the most important thing I have to say, right?
And
Be human.
is the thing about that quote, um, he says, what matters, can I read it, a little of it?
Yes, please
He's
read it, read it.
he
Keep
says,
going.
he says,
Yeah.
I want to start with the most important thing I have to say. The essence of working with another person is to be present as a living being. And that's lucky, because if we had to be smart or good or mature or wise, then we would probably be in trouble. But what matters is not that. What matters is to be a human being with another human being, to recognize the other person as a being in there. And
Yeah.
that's not easy.
No.
It's not easy. Why is it not easy? Because like me, we think we have to help and fix and show you that I'm educated, and all. And granted, that comes from, we want to help, but when you're someone, you look. 6 months ago, I was looking for another therapist, and I was like calling therapists, and my therapist I had seen was no longer seeing people. She referred me to three other people, and I called everyone on the list. And the first one I called was nice, and she spent 15 minutes telling me the interventions and modalities. I don't want that.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I want a person. And that's hard because we all have our stuff that, and if you're going to be in this field, you got to look at that, and you got to work through that. And that's hard to
It's the
do.
most important thing to do.
That's, yes.
Yeah.
And you
The
feel
most
it when
important
you
thing.
connect with someone and you're working with someone who is like, you feel it and you see it when they've dropped, they get rid of the artifice. They're not trying to impress you. They're listening. You can feel that. And that in turn allows you to open up, if ever so slightly, you
Mhm.
know? And that, to me, that excites me so much, because it's it's about all of us, and we all can do it, right? It's going to look differently, right? My authenticity and what it means is going to look different for from you to everyone else. But getting there and sharing that, to me, is amazing. And it's hard. It's hard to open up. So,
And it's not necessarily a requirement for just, or let me say that a different way. It's something that many people can do. You don't have to have all that knowledge, or you don't have to be, I just did this series called Vegas Adventures, where we talked about, one of the themes we talked about was, what is the necessary training to be a healer? And so many people who are natural healers know how to have that kind of relational felt sense with people of authenticity.
yeah,
And they don't have all that goop that gets in the way that we love, but not to put it in front of us, to put it beside us, as Jenlin says, if you read on in The Primacy of Human Presence, right? Put
right.
all those theories and concepts beside you.
Yeah,
You can offer them. You can offer one, say, what do you think about this idea?
right,
But then the client or your friend chooses whether that feels right in their body. And if it doesn't, then we need to have the respect to say, okay,
right. And
but we,
that's where the experience comes in. When to do that, when to back off, when to move in.
yeah, yeah,
There's that scene in Bruce Perry's book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, where he talks about himself as a young psychiatric intern, and he's been seeing all these kids who I think are fostered, and he meets one of the foster parents, I think it is, and it's this elderly Black woman who is just amazing with these kids. And he is like, what the hell is she doing? How is she so amazing with these kids?
yeah,
And she talks to him, and she has that.
yeah,
She just knows. She
yeah,
doesn't need, all these things. And look, again, I want to make it clear. I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
saying you don't need
No, we're
education,
not,
because
we're
there's
not saying
always
that.
someone out there
We
who's going
love
to
all
say, blah,
that.
blah, 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 blah.
We read books, we write books, we love all that. Gendlin did too. He was such an intellectual. However,
Yeah,
it's when and how you use it, right? And in our top-down culture, we're basically trained to use it to keep ourselves distant. Oh, it's a this and a that, and a this diagnosis and a that diagnosis, rather than putting it beside us and making the primacy the
right,
human presence, right?
right, right. And
That's
what adds to that is the already Im imbalanced
yeah.
therapeutic relationship, right? The client is going to the therapist who is up here, who's educated, who has supposedly has all the
Mhm.
answers.
Mhm.
And it's yeah, in my opinion, it's the work of the healer to, create that balanced understanding.
Mhm.
Um, it's just, to me, this another reason why this is so exciting, because it honors the individuality and the uniqueness in every person. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that everyone has to be like Jan or Bessel or whomever, you know. Those unique
Yes.
qualities and aspects and
Yeah.
idiosyncrasies even of every person can be fertile ground for connecting with the
Mhm.
person in front of you.
And that the
So,
body knows, your body knows what's right for you. Your
right.
body becomes the expert when you can
Yeah.
connect in with that, oh, that felt shift in the body when something just, your body knows it feels right, you know, and your nervous system knows it feels right. And
Right.
that's amazing because then we're not dependent on somebody else to reflect back whether we're okay or not. Because that's
Right.
a problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need to know inside me, regardless of what's going on for you. I remember once I really wanted to get into a process group. And so I signed up and I joined this group maybe 10 years ago or even less now. But I was very intrigued with that. And so I got there and it was like there were things going on there that were just totally unsafe.
Mm,
Somebody had was severely diabetic and was dropping, the sugar was dropping. And I'd never seen this before and I didn't really know what was going on until after. But she started to really like get very foggy and not make sense, incoherent. And like the leader knew what was going on and did not stop the group process and get the woman some apple juice.
hmm.
Like that's craziness.
Right.
So I knew to leave.
You mean
I
because
did.
the leader wanted to like protect the container or something?
Yeah, but no, you don't do that when somebody is going
Of
into it.
course.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. It was like up to the group. Everything was up to the group. Everything was up to the group. So where are the boundaries? Where is the safety? Especially if you're with a group of people that don't know how to make them. Anyway, my point being that I knew to get myself out of there. And everything said, don't do it. The
Hmm.
group members didn't do it. The group leader dumped on me with guilt. You can't do that. You've signed up. You made a commitment to the other members. I'm like, this is not an okay space.
Hmm.
And I hope other people will leave too, but I'm out of here. But without that knowing in yourself, boy, it's hard to go against the authority figure, right?
Right.
But we know
Yeah.
that when we can pay attention to the felt sense and the shift that happens when we feel better. It's like, yes, okay, now I understand myself. Now
Yeah.
it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't teach that enough.
Yeah.
It's still
Yeah.
very top down in therapy school.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it feels like it, doing the interviews I do and
Yeah, tell us a
talking to the
bit
people.
about that before we go
Well,
through.
you hear that a lot, and it's people often, and understandably so. I think a lot of my guests want to share what they know and then
Yeah,
talk about, and that's great. Um, but it's my job to kind of get in there and find out what's behind the curtain.
yeah.
Um,
I love
because
that. I
because
love.
that's what connects with people.
Yes.
That's what connects with people. It's the little fissures, the cracks in each of us. We relate to that.
Yeah.
And similarly, clients relate to that too. And especially people who've been traumatized to be in the presence of someone who can take it, can hear it, is okay with it. And that comes through this presence we're talking about. That in turn
Mhm.
reflects back.
Yeah, and don't you think there's a kind of this beautiful kind of paradox of vulnerability and strength that we can show vulnerability. Like I thought about it today. Should I tell people that I don't feel well?
Right,
But then, you can't really be authentic unless you can be authentic.
right,
So,
right,
um, but, so that we can show some vulnerability and at the same time that people know I can hold the space.
right,
And if I can't hold the space, then I shouldn't be doing this.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So,
I love those places of paradox, because we're taught in the top-down Western world, you think one thing. You have to think one thing. If you think two things, well, that's a problem. You just got to have the one thing. But that isn't how bodies work. Bodies have all kinds of places in them. One feels good, the other feels like shit. I mean, it's
yeah,
It's life, right? We are
Yeah.
messy characters.
Yeah. 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 This was something that I never really honored, you know, that what we're talking about here, this
Mm.
being, what Jenlen's talking about.
The
What do you
shaky.
mean? What do you mean be a human? Of course I'm a human being. What do you mean be a human being? I want to give me that book. What's that workshop? And give me that course and that article. I need to read that. That's gonna do it for me. That's gonna make me the best therapist I could become. But that stuff doesn't require the excavating, the inward excavating. That stuff doesn't require looking at your own shadow, your own crap, your own insecurities, your own biases. It doesn't require that. Um, but it's that vulnerability, that cultivation of that vulnerability you're talking about that allows us to connect with people,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Totally is. And yet it has to have also this container of strength.
Of
Otherwise
course.
people don't feel safe, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, this is why in all my training, like the first course, 9 months, is you do your own work with a focusing partner. So we're talking on concepts and ideas, but we're applying them to ourselves. And that's the first step, is that you learn about your own stuff or you continue the journey of learning about it so that then when you're with someone else, you know that place.
Yeah.
It may have different content in it, but the process of it resonates in your own body. And that creates that authenticity when we're in our bodies.
And it's that presence, it's that authenticity, it's that vulnerability that oftentimes has been like ripped away from someone who's been traumatized, especially interpersonal trauma. It's been stripped away
Or
and
beaten out of them.
or beaten, yes, of course. And the process of for initially encountering someone who can reflect that back, uh, and then slowly, creating a space where that client can begin to see that back and then that's wow. That's amazing.
Well, I love that. And then we'll go to our people. I love that you have found that capacity to move from you talked about as a child being really bullied and then looking for the right path, not to go into the other extreme, which is to become the bully or the bossy person or the really inflated narcissistic guy that's struggling so much. But
Yeah.
to really find that and that's what is that in you or me or some of our, what is that we know we've known how to find this place right here of this, what Jenlin called the shaky being, but there's a quality around that shaky being of being held as well. There's a
Hmm.
strength there, right? And so this is what I'm really wanting to teach people, how to find that place in themselves.
Hmm.
And I
Wow.
think, it's through, for me, it's through using Jenlin, working with Jenlin's, felt sense in partnership, because in the
Hmm.
partnership, you got to do your own work and it's reflected in your partner, right?
Hmm.
So I really respect you for that. I love talking to you. It's like and now like I'm sick. Look at me. I'm like lit up in ventral, high ventral, right? Because it's just so, and then I'll probably get better quicker, which is also really cool. So let's go back. Let's go to our folks because I want you to have a chance to interact with our beautiful community of people. I can see Robert up there in his red jacket. Hi, Robert. And we'll go back to gallery. Yeah, here we are.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. How is everyone? Hi, Danielle. Haven't seen you in ages. Nancy. Hi. So questions? Anybody got questions or comments? I'm curious. Oh, hi, Elspeth. Hello, hello. Yeah, come ask a question. Elspeth's a friend in Toronto. You're
Hi,
mi-
Jan, and
Hi.
hello, Guy. Thank you for
Hey,
your dialogue. So maybe this is a provocative question, I don't know, but do you
Go
think
for it.
do you think you need words in therapy?
What do
Jen,
you think? Oh, no, go for it, Guy. Do you think you need words in therapy?
I mean, I think it depends what type of therapy,
Mhm.
you
Yeah, but
know?
'cause my sense is, I mean, I work with people who are nonverbal, adults who are nonverbal, and my sense is, working with them for a very long time, is that language is actually a smokescreen to a large extent and can be very, very intimidating. And if you just cut through the language and try to do as much as you can through body language and through following the other individual and letting them set the pace and then mirroring what they're doing. And a lot of that can be done non-verbally and very effectively. Yeah.
Jan, yeah, what are your thoughts?
I think that when we use language in the way that we're really connected with the other person, um, and we use words when we're from the felt sense, from down in the body, they can get in the way for sure. People, I mean, therapists talk way too much. I agree with that totally. I remember when I was teaching in my house, we have a tall house. So I'd go around to the rooms, we'd have breakout rooms, and I'd hear way too much talking. Like I'd open the door, go, shh. So I agree with you. At the same time, sometimes when you find like a word or a phrase in focusing, it can really bring a handle experience of finding something that really fits and makes sense in terms of what's happening inside. So I think it can go either way. And in our top-down world, we do tend to rely way too much on words. So yeah.
I don't think it depends. It's contextual, right? It's context specific, it's client specific. It depends. It
Yeah.
just depends. I don't think, I think language in this context is kind of given a bad rap. It's the can be useful in certain situations, you know.
Yeah,
That's
it's
my
just that we
opinion.
talk, the talk therapy thing where we do, that's all we do. It can really, yeah, get in the way. But words can be very powerful. I mean, hey, I wrote 2 books, so I'm not going to dump all over words. But I hear you, Elspeth. Yeah. Anybody else want to share? How do you
You know,
think you're doing in terms of presence as a therapist, as a healer?
who is that to?
Anybody?
Oh,
I'm just looking here in the chat. Okay. They teach us to try to keep clients from being too much in their story. Yeah, and yoga therapy, and stay in experiencing sensation. But it seems that many may find that hurtful if they've had their story minimized, etc. Yeah, again, I think to your point, Guy, it depends, right? Some people really need to tell their story. When you've interviewed people over the years, tell us a little bit about that, like interviewing. I'm sure you've interviewed Bruce Perry, probably, right?
yeah.
I mean, Bruce Perry is such an interesting guy. Um, he works a lot with kids
Yeah.
and with play, or how does he work in terms of,
No, no I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure he does, but his primary method is really understanding the developmental stage of the young kid and addressing that. And if anyone who knows more can certainly jump in, but addressing that neurocognitively, actually, addressing that so that he can appropriately work through and with where the child has been traumatized. And he has a whole process of doing that. It's very interesting and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, I've interviewed a lot of, uh, you know, incredible. Well, I'll tell you something. When I first started out, yes, of course, I don't know, of course, but I wanted to interview 𝙅𝙊𝙄𝙉𝙢𝙢𝙪𝙾 and Janina Fisher. Janina Fisher, I actually had started out. She was the first person. I was in a consultation group with her, and she just like
Mhm.
freaking blew me away. She was amazing. But after that interview, it allowed me to contact and reach these other people. And kind of a behind the scenes thing here. When you interview a lot of these major people, they come with their own agenda. It was for me, it was very difficult to like, and granted, I was new. I was a green interviewer,
Yeah.
but it was challenging, and it wasn't until later when I got some more experience and chops and was able to get in there and
Yeah. Assert your
respect.
own spec.
Ye-
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
and really get at what I wanted to get at.
Yeah.
um and Bessel van der Kolk, you ain't getting behind the curtain there. That's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that goes with a lot of other people, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
We've had some of those people on here.
yeah, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But where I wanted to get at, and what I still want to get at is that, like, yes, I want to hear how you work, but how the hell did you get there? What do you mean you suffered this trauma and you started using and you went through all this addiction? Wait, go back to that moment there and lead us to that. They're human moments that inspire people to do this type of work.
Yeah.
And that
Sure.
blows me away.
Yeah, I agree totally. It's that freshness of that authenticity that's amazing. Yeah, and when you are on the rounds and you speak a lot, it's easy to just develop a kind of thing that you do. And
Right.
I never want to do that.
The shtick.
I'm never doing that shtick thing. Uh, Kimber? Hello. Kimber.
Kimber.
Kimber. Ah, hello.
Thank you,
How
Jan
are
and
you?
Guy. I wanted to
Yeah.
pick up on Elspeth's comment about language and words.
Yeah.
I'm not a I'm a manual therapist, and I've been
Oh,
doing this a very long time and discovered polyvagal theory a number of years ago and have been teaching and incorporating it into the work.
wonderful.
And so I tell people I don't chat. New
Yeah.
clients, I say I don't chat. We're going to work, and we breathe, and sometimes we and we do some other things. Um, and I'm not a trained trauma therapist, but I know that trauma is there, and so I'm mindful of it. And what happens frequently to people is that they'll have what in the language of manual therapy would be a emotional release. So
Yeah.
they may cry, or they may tear up, or they may have an expression of something that
Yeah.
I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
Often they won't know anything about. But at the end, I invite people to and move around the room. I built a fairly large treatment room, so people move at the end of it, and I ask them, how do you feel? What do you notice in your body? And
Mhm.
then they feed back as best they can, and I don't coach at all. I just let them fumble for words if that's what happens. And I get a series of sort of similar language from different people about feeling more grounded and relaxed and released and stuff like that. So and I've had lots of therapy and I've done a lot of talking, and it's been helpful. So I don't know, there's some center ground perhaps in silence, because silence is very powerful. And there's something about language that can be a guide and be helpful. And I don't know if there is, I don't think, a singular answer to that paradox, perhaps, but like holding both. But I just wanted to throw that into the conversation that
Yeah, I love that.
quietude is very powerful, and it's been working for me and the people who come to see me.
Yes, I love what you're saying, and I think it's really true. There's a time and maybe more time that we should be paying attention to about silence. And there's also a time where it seems as though language can help to process what's happened. And I think they're both really important. I agree with you very much. And in focusing, we can have a very powerful focusing session, and you don't have to know anything about the content at all, nothing. At the same time, what I've found is that after those very powerful nonverbal sessions, some people really want to then not intellectualize it, but experience something about that through words. Yeah.
To my mind, it's not just the silence, but it's the emotional connection. So in the silence, you can still have the emotional connection. And that seems to be what may be therapeutic from the work that I do.
Yes, sure, for sure. The co-regulation. Nancy Falls, hi.
Hi. Um, I really enjoy some of your podcasts, Guy. I'm happy to be here today. I've been in the field for a lot of years, and I've seen all kinds of trends come and go, and what's the latest and greatest approach. When I first started and talked about, the felt sense, people thought I was just like out to lunch. And now it's kind of mainstream, this whole sense of embodiment. So given your, exposure to so many people, I'm just curious as to where you think we're headed. That's number one. And I'm always interested in the impact that Medicare and Medicaid have on where our trends are heading. So just appreciate your thoughts on that.
Mm.
Well, I don't really know if I can speak to Medicare and Medicaid. I can speak to trends. Yes, I do encounter a lot of different therapists who are using modalities I've never heard of before. And there certainly is, not surprisingly, a major trend in psychedelics,
Mhm.
which is becoming more and more, I think, widespread and prevalent.
Mhm.
And I think there's also is, from what I'm seeing, is a greater appreciation for the importance of somatics,
Yeah.
really. When I first started doing the podcast, that was, I wouldn't say on the fringe, but it was out there. But now I think more and more people are understanding that if they're going to be working with trauma, somatics is definitely integral. And also, I can't tell you how many guests who I speak with who are associated with universities who to this day complain about the breadth and depth of coursework for therapists, that there's not enough work, if any work, in somatics, in trauma. That's still happening to this day,
Mhm.
you know, and how integral it is for therapists who are coming out of these programs to have to do extra work
Oh,
and
yeah.
extra classes. And where do you start? How do you know?
Mhm. Yeah, that's really true.
And not that I'm not from the States, but I'm just really struck by, insurance companies tend to pay for therapy that is evidence-based, or that has the research behind it. And how is that impacting our ability to just be present as human beings, and that the importance of that relational connection.
Yeah, that's good. Probably someone else can speak better that than I can.
Yeah. We have some of that here in Canada too, in terms of, diminishing numbers of sessions you can have with people, and yeah. Well, I think we're coming to an end. It always goes so quickly.
That was
It's
very quick.
lovely to see you all. And again, Guy, I mean, kindred spirits.
Appreciate it, Jan.
That was
Thank
so
you.
fun. Really, this is the most important thing, guys. Like what we're talking about here is the most important thing in terms of healing. And you can see that it's not about just being a trained psychotherapist. And that I love this was Gendlin's view. He said, if we can teach people how to listen to each other deeply in an embodied, felt sense way, far less people will go to therapists. We'll be able to have a culture, a society, a world that can go deeply down inside and be really connected to other people. And of course, we will always still need somebody to go to. We do know things. We're very helpful. But that connection is what really is the heart of it. And boy, do we ever need it now in the world. So thank you. Thank you guys so
Thanks,
much
Jan.
for coming
It's
and
awesome.
keep doing this wonderful work. And if anybody is interested in, there's lots of people here who would be great hosts on your, what are you calling that new series?
It's just a guest host series.
Guest host series, yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of you here. Nancy, Robert, Elspeth, lots of you here. Danielle would be great at that. So I hope you'll connect with Guy, and I'm really grateful that you came and spent time with us. I love this conversation.
Thanks for having me, Jan. Thank you so much.
Thank you to
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Yeah, hope you stay
All
well.
right.
And hey, just one more thing. Do you know who's coming next month to Embody Dialogues? Steve Porges. We're doing an Ask Us Anything in March and celebrating the 2 books that we've shared in common. So
Very
don't
cool.
miss that, because it'll be great to have Steve with us. Yeah. Okay. Bye,
All right,
everybody.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.